A large crowd of people lining up outside a meat shop. Apparently, they sell strange meats that no one has ever eaten before. People are willing to pay as much as they can for this meat. Weeks pass, and the shop is getting more and more popular. Even famous policemen and politicians of the city have become interested in this meat shop. One day, a curious woman finally asks which animal's meat it is. The butcher wasn't ready for this question. He panics, then comes up with an answer which says it's a kind of very rare pork that comes from Iran. This statement spreads in the whole neighborhood and makes the shop more crowded than it is. Butchers who were about to go broke are now making money. Speaking of going broke, let's go a little back to see how this meat became so popular in the first stage. It is by skilled butchers named Vincent and Sophie, who happen to be a couple. And this meat shop is in Paris. It looks like this couple has a quiet life, but everything in the shop is completely different. They have a hard time attracting customers. Even though Vincent makes proper love to his meat, but still there is no hope. Plus, a group of vegetarians are harassing them. One day, they attack the shop and pour blood all over into the shop and break down the place. Vincent, who is very angry, chases after them and manages to catch one of them and takes off his mask. But the group members of the vegetarians save him. Later that day, they go to their friends Stephanie and Mark's house for lunch. In the kitchen, Sophie is crying and is very upset that the bank won't give them a loan. Stephanie first tries to comfort Sophie, but soon she starts bragging about her husband earning very well and suggests Sophie to leave her husband for a better one. Later, it turns out that Stephanie and her husband also have a butcher shop that is working very well. Later, when these two couples are eating together, Vincent tells the story of the attack on his butcher shop. Mark starts mocking him for not installing security cameras. Then he brings a gun and gives it to Vincent to protect the butcher from the vegetarians. Vincent accepts the gift even though he doesn't have a gun license. On the way back home, Sophie tells her husband that she is thinking of divorce because of the dullness of their marriage, but Vincent doesn't listen to her. Then they see one of those vegetarians who attack their shop. In order to take revenge, Vincent reverses to knock him down, but he loses control of the car and runs him over. He panics and wants to call the police to confess that it was an accident, but Sophie doesn't let him. Instead, she suggests that they should copy the work of a French assassin who used to throw his victims partially all over the city. Vincent realizes that his wife has watched a lot of serial killer series, and he agrees with her idea. At night, Vincent takes the body to his shop and starts butchering it. After hours of butchering the body, Vincent realizes that it is too late and decides to continue and to bury it somewhere the next day. The next day, he wakes up late and realizes that the meat or the body is missing. When he is looking for it, Mrs. Cornyard, their regular customer, comes to the shop and says that the meat that Sophie gave her earlier was really awesome, and she liked it very much that she came to buy it again. Here it turns out that Sophie mistakenly sold human meat to her and confused it with pork. Vincent, whose face is as white as plaster, wants to force the customer to buy another meat, but that lady insists that she wants the same meat. When the two of them are left wondering what to do, Sophie hunches up and tells Vincent that she wants to try that meat. Vincent, unable to tell Sophie the truth in front of the customer, and gives her a piece of the meat, and Sophie eats it. To her surprise, it is good. At this moment, when Vincent sees a customer waiting, he is forced to make up a story and says that they import this meat from Iran, and that's why this meat is rare and delicious. After that, they finally give her a piece of that meat and she leaves. Then Vincent tells his wife everything, but it seems that Sophie did not mind eating that flesh, and she offers to sell that meat instead. But Vincent is horrified by her proposal and prepares to throw the meat away. But before he wants to do that, another customer comes to the shop and asks for the meat that the previous customer bought. Little by little, so-called Iranian meat is becoming one of the most popular meats in the neighborhood, and this couple earns a lot of money by selling it. Vincent then gets curious about the popularity of this meat, and at the end of the night, he takes a piece of meat home, and when he tries it, he falls in love with it. Then Sophie comes to him and tells him that vegetarians are good for their business and they should hunt them to keep their shop going, but Vincent jumps in the middle of her speech and stops her. Before going to sleep, he tells his wife not to watch serial killers anymore. The next day, the couple's daughter, Chloe, and her boyfriend, Lucas, are among them for lunch. They make a delicious steak for them, but Lucas does not accept because he is a vegetarian, and Chloe also does not eat out of respect for Lucas. After Chloe and her boyfriend Lucas leave, Sophie and Vincent are furious that all their lunch preparations were wasted on a vegetarian, and Vincent decides to start Sophie's idea to hunt vegetarians. That night, they go to a vegetarian restaurant, and they choose the restaurant owner as their first target. They follow the owner of the restaurant, and Vincent is unable to succeed succeed. Sophie tells him he needs more practice. But the next day, they have a better idea. They pretend to be vegetarians and protest outside the supermarket so they can find a good target for themselves. Finally, a thin man comes towards them and thanks them for their efforts. Sophie forces him to meet at the park later so they can talk about their demonstration movement. According to the plan, they go to the park early and practice different methods of killing their target. But unfortunately, when that vegetarian arrives, we see that he brought a few other people with him, and that's where Sophie and Vincent's plan gets messed up. Because those vegetarians have their own plan to attack a butcher and ask the couple to help them. Sophie and Vincent are forced to go with them for fear of being exposed. On the way, they lie about their identity and business and tell them that they sell flowers. After reaching the butchery, the couple realizes that it is the butchery of their friends Marco and Stephanie. They break down everything and mess up the shop. In the next scene, they go to a restaurant for dinner and talk about how to hunt down their victims, but they seem to disagree on something. And this difference of opinion causes them to fight, and Vincent leaves angrily. As Sophie is sitting there alone, one of the waiters tries to get close to her, and Sophie realizes he may be the one. Later, the waiter takes her on a motorbike, and when they reach her house, they get closer, but Sophie is not ready yet. But when she finds out that he is a vegetarian, she kisses and bites his lip on purpose and invites him to her house to treat his wound. Meanwhile, when the waiter is in the bathroom, Sophie goes to Vincent and tells him the whole story. But Vincent gets angry and rejects her ideas, but when Sophie tells him that if he doesn't do it, she will sleep with the waiter, Vincent gets mad and sharpens his knife. But at the last moment, he is afraid again and asks Sophie to give up on the waiter. But Sophie has another plan. She takes off the waiter's clothes and pretends to sleep with him to motivate her husband. When Vincent sees this scene, he beats the waiter to death. The next day, Sophie gets a call from Stefani, her friend, telling her about what happened last night at their shop. Sophie and Vincent quickly go to their butcher shop and pretend to be worried about them. There, Mark fights with a police officer, and it turns out that that officer is the same man who is investigating Vincent's butchery vandalism. First, the officer asks Vincent to talk alone. Vincent is afraid at first, but then it turns out that the officer has heard about the famous Iranian pork and he wants some of that. Vincent, who doesn't mind making more money, quickly says yes. The next day, they start selling their victims' flesh again, and we see that many customers line up for it, and finally they sell all the meat within an hour. And they decide to make vegan hunting a normal thing. And with the help of a series of deadly weapons, they start their daily killing. By the end of the week, they double the price and make a lot of profit. One day, this couple takes their so-called pork and go to their friends for lunch. As expected, Mark and his wife fall in love with this meat, but when Mark is eating, he bites something metallic. Stephanie, who used to be a nurse, quickly realizes that it is a pacemaker. It turns out that one of Vincent's victims planted it in his heart. Vincent somehow manages the situation, but the argument between Marco and Vincent escalates and they get into a fight. During the fight, Vincent bites Mark's ear and starts chewing it, and they leave. Sophie and Vincent continue to hunt, and their business grows, so does their relationship. One day they go to a festival for vegetarians and Vincent sees a fat boy. Here he realizes that he, slowly turning into a psychopath who starts to hate himself. And then they see Chloe and her boyfriend, who is surprised to see them at the gathering. When they are talking, Lucas says that recently some vegetarians have disappeared, and most likely butchers are behind the cause. When Vincent tries to disagree with him, he gets upset and angrily yells at them and forces them to leave the festival. Unfortunately, one of the vegetarians, who had seen this couple in their butcher shop before, hears the fight and asks if they are the same butchers. Outside the festival, Sophie sees a fat woman and asks her husband to get her. Vincent goes after that woman and does what should be done. After finishing their work, they return home. At that same night, when Vincent is cutting his meat, someone knocks on the door. When Vincent goes to the door, he sees the police officer. Vincent cautiously opens the door, and when the two start talking, the officer says that 10 vegetarians have disappeared so far, and the butchers are the main suspects in their case, and he adds that he couldn't find any dealers who provide this kind of meat that sell. When the officer leaves, Vincent feels worried about their work. He tells his wife about this concern. Sophie assures him that nothing will happen to them, because they either sell the flesh of the corpses and get rid of the remaining by burying them in different parts of the city. The doorbell rings, and they see Lucas, their daughter's boyfriend, at the door. Lucas apologizes to them for the bad behavior he had with them at the party. Lucas says he's been stressed since his vegetarian friend disappeared. At this moment, Sophie, who sees the oven ready, comforts Lucas and tells Vincent that Lucas is going to be the next victim. But Vincent does not do this and leads Lucas out. The next day, without consulting Sophie, Vincent tells the customers that they will no longer sell Iranian pork. This news upsets the customers and causes a fight between him and his wife Sophie. Vincent goes out of the shop with his dog. Then a group of vegetarians who have found out that Vincent and his wife have betrayed them, arrive and want to take revenge for the betrayal that happened to them. Because Vincent and Sophie had claimed to be against butchering animals to fit themselves amongst them and to hunt them down. Sophie tries to get them out of the shop, but they tie her to a chair and beat her. Vincent returns from his walk and sees the van of vegetarians and realizes that he is in trouble. He quickly enters the shop with a knife and sees the vegetarians who want to kill his wife. Vincent angrily attacks them, and he sends two of them out with the help of his dog. One of those vegetarians knocks Vincent down, but Sophie unties herself in time and takes care of the situation. In the last scene, we see that it is their friends Mark and Stephanie who have exposed them. They started suspecting them the day that Vincent chewed Mark's ear. Vincent and Sophie are sentenced to a couple of life in jail for murdering 30 people.